So we read yesterday this beautiful passage about the marriage of the eternal Lord and his spouse. And this whole book is full of such beautiful passages, each reveling in majesty and splendor, more beautiful than the other. And those who believe Sri Aurobindo to be dry, intellectual philosopher would see to what height Sri Aurobindo has lifted up what is called in Indian thought as Shringar Ras. The whole, from simple things he has created such a wonderful beauty and charm and sweetness from flowers, from sun, winds, with these materials. It is really like Vishwakarma. Because normally to create beauty and an atmosphere of beauty, the poet uses a vivid imagery. Poets use about internal carvings of palaces and what colored statues, etc. Here he has used very simple images, images of everyday life. But he has woven through these images such a beautiful Shringar Ras, a poem which, that aspect of the divine, ornament, the whole earth looks like an ornament. When he says that to Savitri, that all these are bridal raiments fit for thee. I have kept them ready for you to wear. What a marvelous line. This marriage of the Lord and the spouse of Savitri and Satyavan is a very, very powerful image. Actually, this image has been used in Indian thought. For instance, we know in the Bhagavad, at the end of the whole story of Krishna, there are two things that stand out, even if all the rest are forgotten. One is the Gita, which liberates humanity from ignorance and darkness and shows the broad, wide road of works towards the ultimate perfection. And the second is Radha's love for Krishna. So, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about it that before the advent of Krishna, there was jnana, but not bhakti. So one of his actions was in the post-Vedic and post-Upanishadic period that through the image of Radha's love for Krishna, we have the culmination of bhakti. And that's how Sri Aurobindo says that the love of Gopas and Gopis for Krishna is the love of the soul for the divine. So the image operates at three levels. The same way we see in Savitri and Satyavan, similar truth Sri Aurobindo brings out. At the most mundane level or the human level, it is uplifting human love to its highest possible acme. And where does it reach its highest possible culmination? When it is a flowing out from the soul of one to the soul of another. So we see that psychic elements so beautifully in this whole movement where Satyavan and Savitri come close to each other, where the physical meeting is only a trigger or a means to express a soul vision, a soul feeling, a soul state if love which is flowing out from the soul and is touched by the divine love above, because both of them are not ordinary human beings, and yet human love can be transmuted by the touch of grace to such levels. At another level, we know that, as Sri Aurobindo has said, Satyavan is the soul of man caught in the grip of ignorance, and Savitri is the grace which has come to relieve him, to release him from this grip and open the path to immortality. So at a second level, the symbol is the mystic marriage between the human soul and the divine grace. And this mystic marriage is the greatest of all delights that one can ever experience, the delight of which all earthly unions and experiences are mere shadows. So this is a beautiful and powerful symbol where the soul merges into the divine. Sri Aurobindo uses this word, in fact, as a soul merges into God. This is the power of that love. And when it merges with love in its heart, carrying its heart and whole being, giving itself to the divine. That is how Satyavan gives himself. He not only says that I give myself, he says thought, feeling, body, spaces, nature, wherever he can think, see, feel, all he offers at her feet. That all these spaces are made ready for your feet. So it's a very, very powerful expression of the soul's love for the divine, where it gives everything that comes into its limits and horizons and within its arc of so-called responsibility. So this is another very powerful symbol. But the most powerful of the symbols is revealed at the end, and he says it's the marriage of the eternal Lord and his spouse. So simultaneously all the three symbols, and this symbol again has been used in the previous poets. That's why Sri Aurobindo ranks in Indian myths Ramayana and Mahabharata as something unparalleled in their beauty and significance. And look at Ramayana. The moment Rama marries Sita, a whole new process starts. New event circumstances following that. Ravana comes because he's drawn to the Shakti, he wants to appropriate the Shakti. The animals gathered around, there is a change of the animal consciousness into the human form, and there is a fall of the Asura to the animal consciousness. In other words, that the Asura will fall and ascend to the next level. So there is a whole set of circumstances which immediately start. Rama's banishment, the slaying of Ravana, the coming together of Sugriva and all the monkeys, and eventually, of course, in Ramayana it goes to that extent that they cannot stay together. This has been one of the interesting things we see in the stories of the previous avatar. For some reason, the Lord and his Shakti, they cannot stay together. They come for a brief while. The circumstances and the earth conspires in such a way that Radha never marries Krishna. And Sita, though she marries, and after a terrible fight, she is won back, she hardly lives with Rama. It is a strange thing, as if all the forces do not want them to be together, because their coming together is a condition for the Ramaraj. So Ramaraj remains a dream upon earth. People still aspire for it. Why? Because without the two coming together, it is not possible. But for the first time we see in Mother and Sri Aurobindo, not only they are coming together, but staying together. And that is why the mother spoke of 24th April as the decisive sign of the sure victory over adverse forces. Because thus far, it has never happened. All the avatars have come with their Shaktis, but they have either been behind, earth has not acknowledged them, or they were separated, or they could never come together. Something or the other keeps happening. But here for the first time we see the Shakti and the Lord coming together, and the Shakti takes the lead and an hour begins. So the story of Savitri and Satyavan, the way Sri Aurobindo presents it, is so closely woven with the story of Mother and Sri Aurobindo and their own life at every level. And that's where we see the, again in Mother and Sri Aurobindo's life, we see, just like Satyavan and Savitri, when someone asked another sadhak that, tell me, who here has the, symbolizes that perfect surrender which Mother speaks about. So the reply was very interesting. Only two persons symbolize perfect surrender. The Mother to Sri Aurobindo and Sri Aurobindo to the Mother. So much so that Sri Aurobindo will wait for Mother, whatever work is for her, and if she has to bring, he would wait. Even if his time for food is getting prolonged, shifted. His sleep, he would wait. Has the mother come back from playground? What beauty of that love and surrender, which at a human level also they have shown. And of course, at another level, Sri Aurobindo has shown the way how a soul should surrender to the Divine Mother. And the Mother has shown the way that how we should offer ourselves to the Lord. And at a third level, which is the most powerful one, once again the coming together of the Lord and his spouse. And that starts the matrix of a new time. So with Savitri and Satyavan, a new time starts, a time when for the first time perhaps man's soul will not only struggle against death, seeking for immortality, but by the divine grace become a sure claimant of immortality. This is a Vedic legend, and the Vedic sages were aspiring for immortality. So I conjure, it's just my own reflection, that while the Vedic sages were showing the path through a zigzag of the gods, this powerful story which comes suddenly is a reminder that there is another way. Because Satyavan doesn't claim immortality through any of those Vedic rituals and sacrifices and mantras. He has only one ritual act, and that is the most powerful of all. He surrenders to the Divine Mother. And then the Mother takes upon herself the burden and grandsimum mortality. So I find this tale is a stand apart from the entire Vedic thought and aspiration which is climbing through very arduous tapasya. And on the other hand, we are shown there is another possibility which will take more and more fruit in time as it comes. Again, with Mother and Sri Aurobindo, we see that how the new time starts, a new matrix, because the moment they come together, yesterday what we were speaking about, that why this is so important, because the creation starts with the Shakti separating from the Lord. The Mother has given this story in great detail, so we will not go into it, but how the Shakti seems to apparently separate from the Lord, goes far and far and far, Brahmajaya, as the Rig Veda says, and then she comes back. But when she comes back, she pulls the darkness further up and up. And then a time comes when she must meet the Lord again. Means in every cycle this happens, that the Shakti, the divine, releases certain patterns into the earth, a Yug Dharma. And this Yug Dharma will now govern the next 1000, 2000, 3000 years. And Shakti will more and more put its imprint upon Prakriti, which will start changing human beings in a certain direction. And after it has gone as far as it could go, then it must once again come back, reunite with the Lord and start a new drama. So how Krishna gave these three gifts, the gift of bhakti, and so we see post Krishna, lot of bhakti movements, not immediately, but down the ages. We don't, strangely, we talk of Veda and Upanishads, but we don't talk of bhakti movement during that period. The seers, they are great, but that is missing. But post Krishna, we see all the medieval saints in India, in other parts of the world, the bhakti coming to the forefront like anything. The second is the path of the Gita, which of course we know about it, and how it has influenced humanity down the ages from west and east and everywhere. And the third great event that Krishna did was, he imprinted upon the mind of at least the Indian people the sense of an Indian nation. It was Sri Krishna's one great contribution, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about it in his Bangla rendering of the first 6 chapters of the Gita, Gitar Bhumika, where he says Krishna established the Indian nation. In other words, symbolically established the sense of nationhood. And after this symbolic event, nations have come up. Actually, nation is a relatively newer unit. It was not, mostly there were tribes, groups, clans, but nation as a unit is a relatively recent phenomena, and it is thanks to Sri Krishna's blessing. But now the world has to move towards a new age, and Sri Aurobindo says very interestingly, very cryptically, he says, but when Krishna comes again, obviously, who else? But when Krishna comes again, he may put himself on the side of internationalism rather than mere nationhood. And it's something amazing. It's a very powerful thing. That something new he is going to bring out. And we see that happening post Mother and Sri Aurobindo's coming together. Many things. One, the coming together of East and West. Process starts. The imbibing of the yoga of the East into the West, and Western strength of matter and the power of matter and material thought coming over to the Eastern sides. So already we see this happening. The liberation of women, all that great imprint which they left here in the ashram and by their very actions, that has come up. And we spoke yesterday about towards the future, the new relation between man and woman. The old equation last 200 years was that woman is a slave to a man. And she had accepted this position. Even the Gita speaks about it, the woman tied by 100 bonds. But now, man is soon going to become the slave of a woman, if he has not already become one. Of course, he must also liberate himself. But this is a new trend, new pattern, which the Mother and Sri Aurobindo have released into this earth. Then, of course, new ideas which they released, the idea of divine presence in matter, the age of truth, so truths of matter, truths of psychology, truths of biology, truths behind the various movement. Every mankind today is busy exploring truths. And this, of course, let me not continue because it's a very long and wonderful story what new time started after Mother and Sri Aurobindo. But finally, for India, just a few days back, it struck me so interesting that ultimately someone thought about speaking and acknowledging Sri Aurobindo on India's Independence Day. And it was so heartening to hear Prime Minister Narendra Modi start this speech by saying that it is Sri Aurobindo's birthday. I mean, when someone had asked the mother that, it is India's Independence Day and also Sri Aurobindo's birthday, mother said, you are reversing that truth. It is Sri Aurobindo's birthday. And therefore this day has been chosen as India's Independence Day, not the other way around. It's a gift on his birthday by the forces that work into this creation. They also gave a little gift to the Lord. So it's so beautiful that he started that, it is Sri Aurobindo's birthday and he had a vision for India, and this is the vision that we have to translate. And another very beautiful thing that he ended by, I think it must be a long, long time when anybody from the ramparts of Lal Killa, the symbol of ancient power, uttered Vande Mataram. Because normally these speeches end with Jai Hind. And I am almost certain that this has not happened in independent India and maybe also pre-independence. So this is a great symbol that someone was moved to utter Vande Mataram. And even recently, even other places, this is a very interesting phenomena. So all the powers they released by their coming together will inevitably, nature will get into this mode, because their coming together means nature will now carry this imprint. That is why the mother said, Sri Aurobindo's birth is an eternal birth, and earth will never forget this memory. As long as time lasts, this memory will be imprinted. Historians will not document it, because historians are like blind men who touch hands and face and think it is the soul. It's a history of appearances, science of appearances, and that is why we have this marvelous line on page 411, where we ended, one human moment was eternal made. Just as the life of a person is not counted by the number of years he has lived, but by the number of soul moments. There are people like Shukdev, Shankaracharya, Swami Vivekananda, who may have lived just how much? Swami Vivekananda lived for 39, 40 years. But what powerful life! How many soul moments! There are people who live for 100 years and they celebrate. But what life? They built a business empire. At the end of it, they left 100 grandchildren to further become parasites. But here is one human moment which is eternal. Nobody has noted it. Nobody would have documented it. And this is the beauty of Savitri, that it brings the truth to the forefront and reveals to us what really is the life of earth. We'll read these last few lines. The wedding of the eternal Lord and spouse took place again on earth in human forms. In a new act of the drama of the world, the united two began a greater age. The very coming of the mother started this new age. Three immediate actions. The Arya, through which new idea forces were to be released in the earth, which now science and all the fields are catching it. Second, she established symbolically a society and called it the new idea, wherein people were expected to engage in some kind of a self-culture, meditation, and do 1 hour of selfless work. This was two things told. Eventually this society will grow into a worldwide movement of such societies which are coming up. And the third was started an honesty store, or the Aryan store, if I am not mistaken, Aryan store. The Sorin had started. And it was a kind of business venture, but with a new consciousness. And now it will have far-reaching implications. Today already, recently Tata Consultancy has given some 100 crores for building new toilets, and people are in business becoming conscious of their social responsibility. And it all started just a symbolic gesture, that age. So they started a new age. In the silence and murmur of that emerald world, and the mutter of the priest wind's sacred verse, amid the choral whisperings of the leaves, love's twain had joined together and grew one. Again, another very interesting moment, which I am so glad was shown in that play few days back, 3-4 days back, because it's there in the agenda, it's not normally read. That mother describes a moment. She says how when she came, she went back, she had this experience of Sri Aurobindo before coming here, and then she had a series of ongoing experiences. Some of them she recounts, but most of them she doesn't. And then she says how this all came to an end. And towards the end, she prepares a meal for man, man refuses, so all those things are there. Then she says on 24th April, she comes back here. And of course, vision of the Supreme who turns westward towards Sri Aurobindo. She says she comes back, and then when they are standing together, she describes a moment. And I'm sure this moment is etched in the history of earth. She doesn't even describe where they are standing. They are standing together, and she says, my head is almost near his shoulders. It's such a vivid description. And they both have this unspoken thought that has the time come? And then suddenly they experience a massive descent of that. And then the mother says, we knew that the thing is done. It is done, and this is the moment. How they knew? That is a moment which no historian can capture. It is the mother's revelation. So a new moment. And who was a witness to it? The sea, the sky, the sun, and perhaps the gods. Maybe not even that. The handful of disciples wouldn't have known. Now we know it, though we hardly understand. The natural miracle was wrought once more. The miracle that love does to life. It turns a death-bound life into life immortal. And as we were saying, even at a biological level, this happens. In the immutable ideal world, one human moment was eternal made. Then down the narrow path where their lives had met, he led and showed to her her future world, love's refuge and corner of happy solitude. That was a time when the Lord and the spouse had another kind of work to show the path of immortality. What about the future world that Sri Aurobindo must have shown to mother? She goes to Karaikal. Where does she has to live? In a dark and dingy room infested with white ants and rats to boot. This is the future. This is the world where you have to change. It's almost, she has come to grips. And there she falls sick and she writes a beautiful prayer. Not complaining, but becoming conscious fully of the task, formidable task. And then he shows her, look, this is the humanity in which you have to work. And then again she would write, gratitude is not born, faith is spent. And then all around the world locked in bitter struggle. For what? For ideas, for a piece of land. This too you must work upon. Yes, I will. So this time she is shown a different room. But in those days, Satyavan takes her to the sylvan solitude. At the path's end, and of course this is Sringaras, at the path's end, through a green cleft in the trees, she saw a clustering line of hermit roofs and looked now first on her heart's future home. There is a very beautiful saying in Sanskrit, Satyam vadam, priyam vadam. Speak the truth and speak it beautifully. Very often we believe truth means harshness. And if we say something harsh, then we are speaking the truth. And very often we add, you may not like it. If you don't like it, why you are speaking? How will it help? It is not going to help the other person. it will only create more and more bitterness. That's why when we speak truth, we have to be also clear that it is spoken in a way that the other person receives it beautifully. And it should be said with all the love in the heart. So one feels like changing. We see it in mother's letters. How beautifully she says. One feels like changing after reading them. Though she could see the darkest corners of human beings. So here we see how beautifully Sri Aurobindo speaks a truth which is bare, simple, harsh. What is the truth? Hut means where she has to live. It's a bare, harsh reality. But that's not how he puts it. He puts it that hermit roofs in that sylvan grove, surrounded by trees. He doesn't say, oh, Savitri saw that she has to leave the kingdom and forever spend her life in these huts. How horrible. Look at how the truth is spoken. And this is a great example for all of us. At the path's end, through a green cleft in the trees. No wonder Sri Aurobindo had such a high level he has put Kalidas. Actually, of all the poets that have found his appreciation, Kalidas is ranked among the highest. And Kalidas is largely Sringar Ras. And if we read this part of the poetry, it reminds one of the descriptions of Kalidas. So here he says, and looked now first on her heart's future home, the thatch that covered the life of Satyavan. What a symbol. On one side, it's the poverty. On the other side, also, look at the human life, the soul trapped in ignorance. Even when it lives in palace, it is covered with a thatch. The thatch that covered the life of Satyavan. Adorned with creepers and red climbing flowers, it seemed a sylvan beauty in her dreams, slumbering with brown body and tumbled hair in a chamber inviolate of emerald peace. Some lesser poet, so-called nowadays modern poets, talk about realism, like modern art. And realism to them is stark, barren, harsh, almost ugly truth. So in every event they see the dark side. They are not able to see the bright side. But here is Sri Aurobindo showing how to look at the bright side. So she is not saying, oh, such a small room. My God, is there AC, Satyavan, by any chance? How about mobiles? Computer must be there. Nothing. Oh, flowers are there, creepers are there, solitude is there. How marvelous is this house? This is what love can do. So when people come to Pondicherry with love, say, dining room food, so lovely. Never had such a food anywhere. Oh, this sun is so nice. It makes us feel so good. And the people, they are all saints. But when we come with the little ego, oof, so unpleasant. Why? How do you people live from April to August? And this is a question someone asked me. How do you people live from April to August? By love. Simple answer. Love. And that love gives joy. Without the fans, there is joy. In Golkund, there is joy. So that is what love does. It makes simple things beautiful and great when there is love. So love is born in Savitri. So how she looks at that simple place. Around it stress the forest anchorite mood. Now look at this image. Masterpiece image. These 4-5 lines come together. Adorned with creepers and red climbing flowers, it seemed a sylvan beauty in her dreams, slumbering with brown body and tumbled hair in a chamber inviolate of emerald peace. So the earth is looking as if she is a goddess with a brown body, and the creepers are like hairs, and she is slumbering, surrounded with peace and the anchorite's mood. Ascetic mood is all around her because there is no TV, no computer, nothing. The mood of the renunciate and ascetic is surrounding her. It is literally Sati in the lap of Shiva. This is the image that comes. It's that solitude. Lost around its stress the forest's anchorite mood, lost in the depths of its own solitude. This is another masterpiece. It is very difficult to combine two rasas. Only some very great master poets can do it. Normally, when one flows with one rasa, one flows with that rasa. Here is our master of masters combining the anchorite's mood with Sringar rasa. He alone can do it. He brings the peace. This Sringar is not turbulent, it is full of peace, like the Sringar of Lakshmi, full of ornaments, but she is by the side of Vishnu, surrounded on the etheric ocean. So, also there is the anchorite's mood all around, the mood of the ascetic, which is there in the forest. Renunciate, bare things, rocks, dangerous creatures, trees, some beautiful, some rugged slopes, and yet there the brown earth is slumbering for a while. Then, moved by the deep joy, she could not speak, a little depth of it quivering in her words. Her happy voice cried out to Satyavan. She is thrilled with this lovely place. See how when we read Gangadharanji, all his life he lived in a small room by the side of one of the staircases. And it was very strange, I believe, that if one had to go to the stair, the same door which would close his room, if he opened it, it would shut the stair, block the staircase. And when the mother came there, she saw for the first time, he is staying like this, dark room. And Gangadharan, what experiences he had? Supramental experiences. When he was in Niman's, mother would come every day assuming the form of a nurse and give him 2 coconut waters. And then he comes back to mother and said, because later on they discovered there was no such nurse, no question of coconut waters. So then mother smiled, yes, of course, she was going and nursing him. And that Gangadharan living in a small little room, and when he is asked, Gangadharan, you live here? Yes, mother. Don't you want? No, mother, I am so happy. This is what love does. The joy. In giving everything, one gets a greater joy. Because it's an act of love. So Savitri feels a deep joy. She is not thinking, oh my God, did I make a wrong choice? Let me think about it again. This fellow is ascetic. Same thing we find in Parvati and Shiva's story. Everybody tells her, you love Shiva. Don't you know his companions? Bhoot, Pishach, he is in bad company all the time. And you know, he also takes bhang. And he wears, he doesn't have his wardrobe, is only 2 or 3 mrigchala. And snakes surround him. Are you sure? Yes, once my heart has chosen, it chooses not again. This is the power of love, which can transform even a Mandodari into a sacred name. In Indian myths, even Mandodari, wife of Ravana, is regarded as someone great simply because of the power of love. So she says, no, I love him. He's my Lord. He lives in Shamshan and puts bhasma over his body for powder. He will give you, he can't afford lipstick. He is going to give you this to apply, this powder. Oh, that will be my joy to receive this bhasma. I shall happily apply it. So this is where she is so happy. She is unable to speak, and yet she says, my heart will stay here on this forest verge. We are reminded of how when the mother left Pondicherry, first time when she comes, she says, I left my psychic being here. This is love. What we know of love. We use the word and distort the name, disfigure its truth. They have shown us the way of love. She lived here just for 10 months before leaving, less than a year. And what love that she left her very soul. And she fell sick because it was too much of a pang. And close to this thatched roof, while I am far, now of more wandering it has no need. I have come to this space. I don't need to go now to Tirupati and Ramanashram and all the rest. I have found my home. Where do I need to go after this? This is how one discovers. No more wanderings. And my heart will always stay here. Even if I am far in Delhi or Timbuktu, I'll always in my heart carry the samadhi. And every day and night I will go there in my thought and imagination, because that nobody can stop me to go and do pranam. But I must haste back to my father's house, which soon will lose one loved, accustomed tread, and listen in vain for a once cherished voice. Once again we see masterpiece of Shringar. We are shown, you see, it's a beauty. Many people don't understand when they read the Ramayana. Janak is a Raj Rishi, a sage, Sthit Pragna. Why is crying when Sita is going? Are Sita is not just a daughter, she is embodiment of delight and Shakti. Who won't cry when the Divine Mother is leaving home? So we have these weird ideas about yoga and sadhana, that one is very stiff all the time, one doesn't smile. It's strange. But in Ramayana we see all the moods, even in Mahabharata, all the human moods touched by the divine and lifted up to what heights. The gopis become mad when Krishna goes away. And Uddhav says, Krishna, you have not taught them about Brahman. They are mad, they are attached to you. This is not right. You must teach them not to be attached to the form. Brahman is eternal, unchanging, all blah blah blah. So Krishna says, you please go and teach them. I don't have time right now because Mahabharata is brewing in the air. And Uddhav goes to tell them, your attachment, tears, sorrow, longing, what has this got to do with yoga and sadhana? Or with Krishna? Krishna is Par-Brahman. Oh, he is Par-Brahman, we didn't know that. They are even more overwhelmed. Oh, we didn't know he is Par-Brahman, we just love him. No, this is not the way. So what is the way, Uddhav? Tell us. They gather around him. Hold your breath, take it like this, then hold it for so many seconds, then release it. When you do this and it grows into a natural Bhrastika Pranayam, then your mind will be quiet, you will meditate, and deep in meditation you will discover Krishna. So the gopis tell him, oh, is it? My God, but there is one problem. We had one prana, we have given it to Krishna. Nothing left now. With every breath we remember Krishna. What do we do now? It's a big problem you have created for us. And then Uddhav comes back chastened in his heart and soul that indeed the shortest and the swiftest path is the path of love. So here we have hints of that he says, one day I have to go and give Ashupati the bad news. The bad news in the sense that he is going to lose one cherished voice. He is going to be sad. Now, Ashupati is a yogi who has traversed all the layers. Why should he be sad? We cannot understand this play of the human when even with the transcendent touch. That's why many people can't understand why mother was waiting in Golkund for Andreda to come. The transcendent still keeping the human for the sake of action upon earth. This is the greatness of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. In fact, they would not have been the example they shown to earth would have not been possible to follow. If the mother said, who is coming, Andre? I have no son, there is no father. Then we would have said, Mother, we don't understand all this. We will perhaps, Himalaya is better. But she has shown every mood. And when he is late in coming, she says, Pavitra, go see if there is a telegram. And sure enough, there was a telegram that he will be delayed by some time. How can we understand this beauty, this mystery, this play of love, manifold play of love? And here we have that Savitri speaking to Satyavan and saying, for soon, but I must haste back to my father's house, which soon will lose one loved accustomed tread, and listen in vain for a once cherished voice. For soon I shall return, nor ever again. Oneness must sever its recovered bliss, or fate sunder our lives while life is ours. Because I am going to come back not to return. Even if there is a weekly train, I will not go back. Even if there is a free flight offer, no way. I'll come and stay forever. Oneness will not It's recovered bliss. Every time we discover another self who is an aspect of our own being, there is a recovery of bliss. There is a oneness. Once more she mounted on the carven car, and under the ardor of a fiery noon, less bright than the splendor of her thoughts and dreams, she sped, swift-reined, swift-hearted, but still saw, in still lucidities of sight's inner world, through the cool scented woods' luxurious gloom, on shadowy paths between great rugged trunks. Look again, what a marvel. To start with, look the women of those days. She has not come with a charioteer. Savitri is not just an ordinary princess. She knows how to drive the chariot. She mounts on the chariot. So when today women drive car, we should not feel Kali Yuga has come. In fact, it means they should drive even fighter pilots. Incidentally, that is going to happen. Indian Air Force will soon have women in there even as fighter pilots. That's what a woman, she is the Shakti. She can do everything. So she gets into the carven car. Car means the chariot, and she speeds. And as she speeds, the sunlight appears less brilliant than her luminous thoughts. Look how beautifully. And look at this line. How as she goes, she sees in still lucidities of sights in her world, through the cool scented woods, luxurious gloom, on shadowy paths between great rugged tongues, paced towards a tranquil clearing Satyavan. She looks and sees Satyavan is moving through the path. It's bright noon, gradually fading into evening, and he is moving towards that path, and she is watching him through the cool scented perfume. A nave of trees enshrined the hermit thatch, the new deep covert of her felicity. Where has she found to start this new drama? In the thick woods. The divine has his own ways and a wonderful sense of humor. Preferred to heaven, her soul's temple and home. She is the daughter of heavens. She could have chosen Satyavan. Good, I have chosen you, you have chosen me. I have the capacity to be with you in heavens. Come along. She doesn't say that. That's not the way it is. She chooses his home. What a wonderful line. It is such a tremendous spirit of sacrifice made out of love, but Sri Aurobindo makes it appear so simple and natural. Heavens are her home. And she who is Raj Rajeshwari, how does mother come and stay here? Sometimes, one just wonders, forget everything else. Just the fact that she grew up in a city like Paris, and that climate, that atmosphere, and when we complain of heat and all, even while being in India, we complain of heat. And the mother coming and living here, not once is saying, you know what, I think for 2 months I need a change. Wearing past saris, she would herself suture those saris, clean the house, clean her room, and sit before Sri Aurobindo as if she is nobody, no one. This is how, that is the greatness that makes the great even greater. And that's what we find in Savitri's spirit, that she has chosen this place her home. She prefers it than the heavens. And that is why, because of this spirit, she could say later on when, she is offered the boon with Satyavan to live in the high heavens. She says, give these boons to lesser spirits. Heavens were once for me my natural home, where I have moved. I abandon not earth for higher worlds. I do not abandon. I have chosen it. So she says, preferred to heaven, her soul's temple and home. This now remained with her heart's constant scene. End of Canto 3 end of book 5. Very beautiful book and canto. So we take a break and we come back after 10-15 minutes and start with a new book, the Book of Fate.